Shabbat Shalom. It's been quite a week here in Southern California, and I'm recording this on a Wednesday. Don't know what will happen by the time Shabbat comes around. Seems like every day just brings something really new. A couple of weeks ago, I was praying for rain, benching Geshem, and as I do every year after I've done that, is I go and buy myself new windshield wipers. I'm very glad I did, because even though it hasn't rained since February, I was driving across a mountain road on Sunday and it started raining. So I was really glad I had the wipers. But as I got across the Ortega Highway towards the end, there's a downhill slope and you can see Lake Elsinore in the distance. There appeared this magnificent rainbow that started at the base of the mountain and went right across the road that I was driving on. And I really wished that I'd had a place I could pull off so I could take a picture of it. It was just gorgeous. And I thought, well, that's interesting. We had just read Parshat Noach the day before, and where we talk about Noah building the ark and the promise of the rainbow. And here it was right in front of me. The next day, Monday, just a couple of days ago, I went for a walk and it was so windy and I had no idea that at the time the Silverado fire had already been ignited, and there would be 90,000 people just a few miles away from me who were evacuated. And I myself have got stuff ready to evacuate just in case, and have been following the tweets from the sheriff's office and waiting to get the alert. Fortunately, here we are Wednesday, and some people have been restored to their homes. But it's interesting that this week's Parsha that we're reading is Lecha, go forth. What a coincidence. Also on Monday, I met with my granddaughter in Connecticut over Zoom. She and I have been talking ever since I trained her last year for her bat mitzvah. She didn't want to stop studying, and so we sometimes study, sometimes we just talk. So we were in the middle of talking, and her younger brother, 9-year-old Shlomo, wanted to say something to me, and she was like, "What do you want?" And he said, "I want to ask Safta about her immigration story." And I said, "But I'm not an immigrant." And he said, "Well, you have an English accent." "Yes, but I was born in this country." So I started to think about what makes an immigrant and how I came here as a 21-year-old, even though I went to England from Boston, where I was born. When I was 9 months old, my mom took me back after my father died. I kind of identify as British and American, and I have the passport. I just came into the United States and didn't have to go through any process in order to stay here. In this week's Parsha, Lecha, which means go forth, we meet Abram. That was Abraham before he was given the H in his name, the He in his name. And the portion begins, Vayomer Adonai el Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladecha u'mibeit avicha el haaretz asher ar'eka. You shall go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I thought of opening today with singing Lech by Debbie Friedman, because that always brings me into Lech Lecha. But with the fires and getting ready to evacuate and getting that question from my grandson, I thought about, what does it mean to have to get ready to go, to leave? And what do you take with you? And if you're going like that, what do you take? Is it just memories? I know when I was getting stuff ready, I got my passport together and cash and things that I would need on the road, and also my family pictures that cannot be replaced. But when Avram was told to go, he was told, first, leave your land, then your birthplace, then your father's home. Why that order? Well, if you forsake your familiar surroundings, you do it in heart and memory, as well as in your body. And you'll sooner forget the land that you were born in than you will the street you grew up on, or sooner that than your home and your family. And that's the theme here in Lech Lecha, is family. Abraham, I'm going to call him Abraham, but he doesn't get that name until the end of the Parsha. Abraham left hearing God's voice. His father Terach had a store that had idols. We've already been told that in the Midrash that Abraham knew of one God, recognized there was one God, and destroyed those idols. We did that last week. And then as he's leaving, there's all sorts of things that happen to him. He takes a really circuitous route, following a cloud and following his instinct and the voice of God. And he struggles on his journey. First he reaches famine. He has famine. Then he goes to Egypt. He disguises his wife as his sister because he's afraid he will be killed. When the Pharaoh finds that out, he sends him packing because all sorts of bad things happened to Pharaoh when he was trying to take Sarah as his wife, not knowing that she was already married to Abraham. So they leave Egypt, and they do it with a lot more cattle than they went with. Now, originally, when Abraham was going through the land, he followed his instincts. He went close to the river, wherever there was water, because water fed his cattle and it also gave him crops. And then his shepherds quarreled. His shepherds quarreled with his nephew Lot's shepherd. Lot had come along on the journey with Abraham. He took his household with him. And then Abraham and Lot quarreled themselves. And so they decided, you go left, I'll go right. And Lot chose to live and graze his cattle in Sodom. Then we read later that Abraham goes from being a shepherd to a military man, because then the kings of Sodom, there are 4 kings that fight with each other over territory, and they take Lot as a prisoner. They kidnap him. And then Abraham has to go and rescue his nephew. So we see the change that Abraham has along this journey, and it takes place over many years. Through it all, what we see is that Abram has faith. He has faith that that original calling he had of hearing God's voice to say, go to this land, would happen. And he had a foreshadowing, a premonition when he was told to walk through the land as if he owned it, but he didn't own it. When he got to Canaan, he found it occupied. There were people there already. He couldn't just go in and take over the land, even though there were plenty of areas to graze. There was a foreshadowing in that, walking through the land as if he owned it, and yet his generations wouldn't go into the land until the time of Moses. And he was told there will be all these sorts of things that happen before they get to the land, but there will be two great nations that come from you. There was the nation descended from his son Ishmael, the Arab nation, and the Jewish nation from Isaac. And that happens in this portion. Getting back to where we are in Orange County and how we're going through our journeys, I wonder, what is it if we have to leave our homes immediately? What do we take with us? What's important to us? It's not just the body, it's what's in our hearts and what's in our memory of the family. We take first our family. I live alone, so I took family pictures. We take care of our pets, and then we take care of our community. Come, family, come with me on this journey. And it's also a journey of transformation. We don't know where we're going to end up. 2020 has been one heck of a year. We still have many miles to go as far as finding a cure for prevention of coronavirus. We have an election coming up. We have all sorts of transformations to go. But through it all, connecting with each other and family and making sure that we're all right, even as we'll see later, Avraham, when Sarah dies, purchases the land. He doesn't just take it, even though it's offered to him. He insists that he has to pay for the land. As we go through this period of time, we're also setting the seed. We're walking the land for our future generations. And the children that are here today will tell stories of the time in 2020, just as the generation that I grew up with told me stories about the Second World War and rationing and being evacuated. It's all part of our transformational process. At the very end of Lech Lecha, we read about Avraham making a pact with God, circumcision. It's a promise, it's God's promise. And he circumcises not only himself, but his whole family, all the males in his family, which must have been very difficult to do. But it was part of his faith in God, and that is something that we continue to this day. At that point, he's given the name Avraham. He takes the letter He, and the He comes from God's name. And Sarah goes from being Sarai to being Sarah. She also takes a He. She had a Yud at the end of her word, and the Yud and the He, with the two of them together, create the nations going forward. How much more so with us having faith and trust that all will be well, that as we go forth, whether there's fires, whether we're in our own home, whether many choose to leave and go somewhere else, it's a new world that we're creating. And we have to do it with our heart and body and taking that memory with us to pass to the next generation. So maybe I did want to start with Lech, and I'll end with Lech, because I think it really tells us what Avraham was about for us today. Lechi lach, to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha, to a place you do not know. Lechi lach, on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechi lach, lechi lach, and I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lechi lach, to a place that I will show you. Lesimchat chayim, lesimchat chayim, lesimchat chayim, lechi lach. And you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechi lach. You are blessed on your journey, and so you too shall be a blessing. Shabbat shalom.